Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of Image Editing Des 460. Here is our outline, what we're going to be talking about today. Kind of following the same format as usual with this week. We're going to do the week 3 overview. So we're going to go through all the week 3 work briefly. And then tomorrow I'll be actually putting the assessment and assignment together, or at least one of those, because this week they're really similar, going to be designing movie posters. So we're going to go through that, and then we're going to talk about the reviews from week 2. So mainly the assignment last week. We're going to go over that today, then take a break, and then continue with the review. So that is what we'll be doing. Let me talk about some announcements first. Get this over with. Christy Paulson, class learning coach, her schedule is now current, and here it is. It's changed a little bit from last week. If you are having any trouble with any aspect of the coursework and might need a little bit more help than just kind of a quick tip or something like that, then Christy's good and she'll work with you in a lot more detail. So she's a Photoshop expert. If you're running into any issues, you can always see her, and she can help you kind of extensively on a lot of things. So just be mindful of her schedule, and that is current as of, Sunday. So grades are also the next on the list. Those are all ready. Actually, through about noon today, a little after noon, I did some updates for late submissions and resubmissions, and so grades are up to date. It's a good time to have a look over your grade and just go through it and see where you stand. Checkpoints are up to date. Late work, everything as of noon today is up to date. So if you've submitted anything after that, it won't be graded, but it won't be graded if you look at it now, but I usually do grades several times throughout the week. So late work, if you can get it in by Wednesday, the deduction will be less. I've told a number of people that already. After Wednesday, it's usually the full 20%. So, that does apply. There was quite a few people that didn't hand things in this week. So that applies to a number of you. But there were also a number of people that did turn things in, and we'll be going over those projects today. So that's all I have for now in the announcements. Let's go ahead and talk about week 3 work. So here we've got the discussion, visual hierarchy, and composition in movie posters. So it's all movie posters this week, even the discussion. But one thing that I really like about this discussion is that, we can look at Vicky's examples here, but I really like how it breaks this down, has you look this over in terms of what is the most important element in the design and how does the designer make you pay attention to the element. Number 2, what do you look for first when you look at this poster? It's kind of related. What do you look at first? These are really closely related. How is the rule of thirds used? And then also discuss uses of color and texture. You can really discuss any of the design elements. Think of CRAP, contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity. You can talk about any of those things, or some other aspect. That's fine. These are just, I would look at these as an example of a couple of different aspects that you can talk about. Color and texture, obviously, you're going to see a lot of that in movie posters. So here it's like, what are they using to get our attention? I'd say probably these 2 main characters, and they're larger and they're placed higher on the page than anyone else. And they kind of have this triangular kind of shape to them, like light shining down on this operating room table. But this little scene in here is kind of secondary to kind of the main characters, especially her because she's in front. But, it's interesting to see a lot of these movie posters and how they arrange these compositions. Should be a fun exercise, 2 exercises this week. Another one, Silence of the Lambs, Jodie Foster. This one was interesting. I haven't, when I was first looking at this, it was difficult to say. There's nobody in the class now that I'd ask what they thought. Were they walking into the poster or out of the poster? So when I first looked at it, I felt they were walking into it. I think that's because my eye was drawn to the colors back here. And, they're obviously overlapping, which is another depth cue. But when I look at this guy's foot right over here, now I can tell they're walking toward us. And that would be kind of typical, but when you look at these silhouettes, it kind of plays with your mind a little bit. And that ambiguity tends to be interesting sometimes because, you're not quite sure what's going on, but it could almost switch so that they're walking into the poster as well as out. But if you look at a few of those details, you can notice they're walking towards us. So do some kind of cool stuff with just silhouettes and the graphical treatment of people, or really anything. But this was just a really simple poster, and I liked the layout. Go through and look at a few more. So, yeah. So I mean, basically, go through and point out what do you notice first. What do you notice in the JAWS poster? And when you do your designs this week, obviously take these kind of cues literally in terms of what are you going to show off? What are you going to kind of highlight, make the most important element in your visual hierarchy when you put this together? So we can look at this and talk about what's the most important design aspect and how does the designer make you pay attention to that element. Here we're using scale and position. Here, it's kind of debatable. I would say, you kind of go between her eyes and the moth here. And it's kind of this triangular thing that your eyes kind of move around it. But I would say your eye kind of settles on the moth and then goes down to the title down here. So, what's the designer playing with? He's playing with position, or she. I don't know if it was a man or woman who designed this. So, sometimes it'll say, but you don't have to know that in this case. But it might be interesting to give the designer credit. Anyways, make sure that you go through and answer all these questions, address them. You can use any of the design elements. It doesn't have to just be color and texture, but that's giving you some examples of what to think about. What does a designer use in general? You notice, for example, here I noticed the use of scale, probably more than anything else. And then position on this one. So I would want to talk about that in my discussion. But I think researching this and going over and doing the discussion first this week makes a lot of sense because you're going to be actually working on movie posters and designing your own. So why not take some cues from the experts and kind of study these, and that way you've done this and laid some groundwork for when you actually go in and start doing your project. So my recommendation, start with a discussion first this week. If you don't do that already, this is going to help you for what we'll talk about next is the assessment. So this one, you're going to actually be creating a movie poster. Again, I'm going to be doing that tomorrow. Might not create two of them. I might just create one of these, but it depends on what we have time for. Obviously, it always kind of seems to be the case. So you've got free images from this site, sxc.hu. So that's provided. You're going to create a 9 by 13.6 at 300 dpi movie poster. And then you're going to submit it as a JPEG. So pretty straightforward in what it's asking, a lot of those basics. But the other thing, we're going to use a specific font. I'll show you what that looks like. Steel Tongs, that's what this font is. That's a Looks like what they typically use on a lot of the movie posters. It's really tall and narrow. They'll use these kind of at the end for the credits and kind of at the base for the credits. But depending on your design and what you have in mind, you can probably use it at the top. And here's a bunch of inspiration for your poster. So on this one, this one was a good one. I like this phantasm. And, again, when you get the size, so the scale is a major thing going on here. We've got all these, smaller elements, people back here, and this large guy is kind of takes the center stage. And so scale and placement, it's not very symmetrical, but it's not quite symmetrical, but it is very symmetrical. As you can see, it's a center weighted design. We've got like this kind of tombstone in the back, and he's in the center, this main character. She's in the back. And we've got these balls back here to kind of add balance to the overall visual effect. So sometimes centered designs, symmetrical designs like this will be used to show power and authority. They also tend to show balance and harmony. So depending on your message, I think it's a little bit more like kind of sinister, evil, power and authority is what the designer is likely going for in this overall design. And it's definitely a complicated one. There's a lot going on. But I thought this was an interesting design, the layout. I tend to be drawn toward those center designs, and you can choose whatever interests you, obviously, but I tend to like the centered kind of symmetrical designs, but you can choose anything, whatever kind of strikes you as being interesting. When you submit both actually just this project, you don't have to, because let's go back. So you're going to actually be copying a poster. So if I decided to copy the Phantasm one, I would have to make up characters. I'd probably, I'm not going to be necessarily expecting one as complicated as this. This took an illustrator a long time to do, but, you're going to make up, for one version, for the assignment, you'll be making it up. But for this one, you would want to copy what this is. So, all right, let's go back here. The best way to learn how to design is to copy an existing piece of design and see how it is put together. For the assessment, we create our own movie poster in the style of an existing movie poster. Choose your favorite movie poster from here. That's where we're looking, IMP Awards. Collect free images. We talked about that. And then design the movie poster in the style of. But you're also going to make up the name. So this is probably the second one to do. I guess if you could say it'd be wise to go in order this week, this would be the week to go in order. Discussion, assessment, and then assignment, because they kind of move up in terms of how complicated they are. The discussion, you're doing mostly research. The assessment, you're actually going to copy a poster that's out there. You're going to make up the name. And then you're going to submit the URL of what you copied. So, you don't have to copy this exactly, but, you might want to consider we've got a central layout. Maybe you've got 3 characters in here. Maybe you don't have background characters, but you've got some sort of element going on in the background to kind of use that space and utilize that central symmetrical design. Here we got this interesting guy falling from the top, and some of those minor things, you don't have to do that, but maybe you want to do that. I would say provide a link to this original. All you do is cut and paste this in the submission box, in the drop box, that text area where you can submit it. And so I can see, all right, what's your motivation? Let's see what you kind of got this from. And you're not copying everything. You're not necessarily going to do the same thing, but you're going to look at things like, all right, this is a balanced central design. You've got a key character placed in the middle. You've got some backup characters placed in the back. You've got the text at the bottom, but if you decided that your poster worked better with the title and the text right underneath it at the top, that could be fine too. You're not necessarily going to copy this to the T. It's just more or less using it for inspiration and ideas, so that when we do compare it, I can look at both of them and say, all right, I can see the influence here and what you were working with. So hopefully that makes sense. We've got the tagline down here. We've got the title at the top. We've got the credits, and maybe that what was it, Steel Tongs font you could use down here. But if you made changes where you wanted to use more of those things at the top, those are minor changes, and I'd be fine with that. Whatever kind of works for you. Just make sure that you've got something that's inspired or inspiring your design, and that you're basing your design on some of these major elements that are in whatever you select. So, what are some other interesting ones? I mean, this would be kind of a simple one, keeping up with the Joneses. I mean, all this is faces, but the tough one about this is, getting all these people. One of the key things is that they're all kind of looking right at the camera. And sometimes it's not easy to get all those shots. And that's one of the things that's making that work well. This layout is that they're all the characters are looking at the camera. So depends on what you can really get, but sometimes it's good to imagine, what if they were looking off to the side? What if they were looking at each other in this? So that gaze and direction of where they're looking is adding to a lot to the success of this layout and what makes this work, in my opinion. I think if the characters are looking off to the side, they're looking out of frame, and that takes their eye out of frame, and that's not good. If they're looking at each other, then that might possibly work. But I don't think it'd be as strong as a layout with this 4-up format if they weren't looking right at the viewer. So I don't know, you might want to just kind of shop around on here for a while and figure out some things that you like. Maybe you want to go simple, a little bit more simple. And it doesn't have to be a woman in a tub. You just can figure, well, what else might also work here? We've got this kind of flat element toward the bottom, and then kind of the woman here. It's interesting, but it could be anything. It could be a beach that you use that horizontal, and an umbrella right here with some people sitting under it. And and it could be titled beaches or something. It really doesn't have to be exactly a layout, but I want to see that you kind of use these major elements in your project that compare with the original layout, what you took it from. So that's what we'll be doing in the assessment. Not copying, which is good. I think you're more taking inspiration and using a lot of those key elements. So whether you want to go complex or you want to go a little more simple, I think simple is probably a good call. It's probably a good way to go in this one, because working with those simple elements will just be a little bit easier for you. to come up with something that looks good in the end of it. That wasn't the right link. Let's go back to sxc.hu. I've used this website before. It's a good one. It's funny because a lot of these will be a lot of them will, the best ones will be images by Getty or iStock Photo that are over here. So you can't use these, but you can use all of these. And there's plenty of good images, but I kept noticing that when I've used this site. It's like I always want to come over here, but these are all paid ones on the right. So all these are the ones you use if you want to incorporate a butterfly or a moth in your film. It just depends on what you're after. So you can also use, so this is one resource actually. You can also use your own photography, of course, or the usual methods are all fine for collecting stock photography. You can even do your own vector art. It's up to you, however you want to do it. But keep in mind it's an image editing class, and usually photography is kind of what we're leaning towards here. So I don't mind if you want to use some vector artwork, but try to use mostly photographs in this one, in both of these. And a lot of times they'll almost always show the characters from the film on the cover. Occasionally they don't, but almost always they do. So, characters in a film, if you want to pretend to make an animation or something like pretend to have a Pixar project, you can do that. I think it does get challenging because you're going to actually have to design those characters yourself. But that would also be another way you could do it. And maybe you want to keep it really simple and just do like one character, make a vector chicken or something like that. But that would be fine. But try to incorporate some of what we've been using, Photoshops and brushes, and try to use some of the textures and work the background a little bit. So maybe he's in a scene that you could compose in Photoshop. But I'm all about it if you want to create some sort of a character, that's fine. Just incorporate that raster side of the design. And use some interesting textures, brushes, things like that. All right, so the other thing that, we'll look at that on the next one, but you can also do Google Images. That's all, so long as you have the source. Here's a quick video. Why don't we actually take a look at that? I'm just going to go ahead and play this from the beginning. It is on Gathering Up Google Images. So I'm going to play that full screen.
I'm sure that most, if not all of you, are familiar with Google image searches, but you may not be familiar with some of the refinements that you can process when you are doing image searches. So I wanted to show you a couple of tabs that I go to when I do searches for imagery in my projects, and that might help you as you work forward in yours. And since we're all working on a kayak brochure for this course, let's go search for images of kayaks. And again, I think probably many of you have already done this search, and perhaps this page looks familiar. These are images that come up in a search. So I wanted to show you a couple of tabs that I go to when I do searches for imagery in my projects, and that might help you as you work forward in yours. And since we're all working on a kayak brochure for this course, let's go search for images of kayaks. And again, I think probably many of you have already done this search, and perhaps this page looks familiar. These are images that come up in an image search for kayaking. And if you mouse over each of the images, you'll notice that the size in pixels comes up in the lower corner. And of course, the higher the number, the larger the image. This one, for instance, is not very large. It's 500 by 333. And as nice an image as it is, it's a lot smaller than this one. So this one would be more applicable for your use because you can shrink it down and then increase the resolution of it. Remember that these are going to come down as lower res images because they're online. So you want to look for a high number. But one of the filters that I like to use is the image size. And if you click on search tools, you'll get a submenu here. And if you click on size, you can ask Google to return only large images. And so I did that. And you may get fewer images, you may get more limited images, but we do have some nice ones here. And if you mouse over them, you can see that they are pretty high in pixels, which means you can download them, open them up in Photoshop, and change the resolution, which will shrink the image, but it will give you a better quality image. So you want these high numbers here. And if you wanted to run an image of, say, a kayak across the whole top of your brochure, you're going to want to look for the highest numbers as possible here. This one's pretty good, 3428 by 1500. Now, if you wanted to get that image, you click on it. And here in Firefox, all I need to do is just click and drag the image onto my desktop, and it comes over as a JPEG right there. And I can open this image up in Photoshop and do my editing right there. So that's great. Now, that's fine for getting large images, but sometimes you want to make sure, and this isn't the case for your student projects, you can use any images you want, but if you were working for a client in the business world, or if you were working on something that was going to be used publicly, you'd want to make sure that your images were legal and free of copyright constraints. So this tab here, usage rights, is a handy one to know about because it will allow you to do a search for ones that are legal and labeled for reuse. Okay, you notice the non-commercial reuse here. I generally go to this one, labeled for reuse with modification, because then I know that I could change the image if I wanted to. I could crop it, I could recolor it, that sort of thing. So I click on labeled for reuse with modification. And you'll notice that my large image search is still active. So now what I'm seeing here are large images that are labeled for reuse with modification. That means they're okay to use. I generally cite the source anyway, just to be courteous, but I'm not going to get any copyright infringement hassles by using any of these, okay? So let's say we like this one. I know that I can use this and it looks really good. Again, to drag it to your desktop, you just click and drag to download it, and it comes right over as a JPEG. If you wanted to get the image URL, the actual location of it on the internet, click on View Image. You'll get it full screen there. Boy, that's really good quality. And up here is your image URL. And if you were to put that into a browser, you'll be taken right to this image, okay? Now, if you want instead the actual website where the image came from, you go to instead Visit Page. Click on it and it takes you to the page where the image came from. This happens to be Wikimedia Commons, which is a resource bank of imagery, which is really helpful. So this would be the website citing that you would use. So you can either use the image URL, or in this case, the actual website where the image came from for citing your sources, okay? So these filters are really great to know about as you do your searching. You can get larger images. You can filter by color. If you want just black and white images, you can filter by photographs, clip art, line drawing. Now, the more filters you apply, the fewer images you'll probably get in your returns. But it does allow you to filter and to customize what you get for your image sources, and gives you confidence that you're choosing images that are going to be large enough and legal to use. So have fun searching, and good luck.
All right. So good to know. More places to get images. We're all about images in this class. And like I say, if you want to use vector, that's great. Just make sure you use some imagery in there somehow. Work it in so that we're using images somehow. But that gives you some idea ways to get some more imagery for these projects, because they're obviously heavily Photoshop based and heavily image, well, a lot of image editing, let's just say that. So let's look at the rest of this. This is the assignment. Again, I'm going to be doing one of these tomorrow. I don't know if it's going to be the assessment or the assignment. At least one of them will go over tomorrow. This is the same size, but this one you're pretty much on your own. You're not necessarily copying. You don't have to submit another one. You're going to be using that Steel Tongs font, so you're going to be using that font. Make sure you get this. Gives you a chance to download it from both locations. Probably easiest to just do it when you do the assessment. Like I say, if you work on it in order this week, discussion, assessment, assignment, you'll be right on track. And you can just download this font once and use it for both the assessment and the assignment, and kind of familiarize yourself with this website, impawards.com. So a movie should contain a tagline, release date, and fictional website URL. This should be pretty easy if you've done the assessment. And a little bit more fun because you get to do whatever you want. Be sure to make dynamic uses of color and texture when creating this poster. Please view many examples of movie posters. You can see at impawards.com. So obviously, we've already done this by the time we get to the assignment if we've been working in order. So that may not need to be there. But again, you're going to be submitting JPEG this week. 300 DPI format is ideal. So really, there's not much more to say about this one other than if you look at some of these IMP awards, you can take a lot of inspiration here. I mean, here's one that looks all animated. Not Pixar, but it's got, it has, I guess, the background is definitely looks like a pixelated kind of graphic with blur, soft edges, blur around the moon back here in the clouds. Those kind of effects are really hard to come up with in vector, but the characters, for example, look like they're done in vector. Quite possibly, I'm not sure how they did them, but the monkey character, him definitely look like they were created in vector and have some of that aspect going for them. But you can see that we're kind of using both aspects here. This example, so vector and raster. And we talked about last week, Photoshop has plenty of vector tools, but what I mean when I say vector is, if you wanted to work in Illustrator and create a character, that would be fine for a project like this. So up to you, whatever you want to do. Anyway. So that is the basics of the assessment and the assignment and the discussion this week. Still nobody in class. I'm just the only one today so far. And kind of hoping someone will show up before we get into the reviews, but we're kind of at this point. I don't really have much else to go over on this today, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the reviews and we'll get started on that. All right, let's this one is Carolyn Thompson's. I thought she did a good job. Very stylistic in terms of the Art Nouveau, Art Deco. This is a little more Art Deco with the geometric shapes. It's a little bit less of the kind of swirly, swooshy style that Art Nouveau has. But this is acceptable. It's good. It's kind of the same era. I think I remember mentioning that you could do Art Deco or Art Nouveau, whatever you felt like. This is a little bit more for that Art Deco style. But I like the colors. I like just the simple black and gold. The font works. Kind of the centerpiece logo. She did a pretty good job with this. I think this turned out well. I guess when I look at, well, you know, how could we maybe work this piece? What could we do to improve it? I don't know that I do a whole lot with this. I think it looks good. You know, I think the idea of curving this, I don't know if it's really, it could work. You know, curving the come join us at the top and the for dinner and dancing, we curved it so it was in a circle. It could work, but it also works how it is, especially because we've got all these angular lines in here anyways. And you'll see that there's some examples where I've actually told people that, you know, integrating that text with this small square format a little bit more, you could curve the baseline and it would just kind of wrap itself a little bit better. But in this case, you know, she's got these kind of stops here that point in that actually I do kind of like. And one of the design typical rules of thumb is stay out of the corners and don't have too much contrast in the corners or the sides. And she's doing that with, you know, putting these elements in the corners, but I think it works in this case. And they are kind of pointing us back in. So I think that these lines here going straight across tend to work a little bit better. If these were gone, if you lost these, if you can imagine it for a second, the little black corner pieces, if you lost them, it might not work as well, and we'd have to round it. What that was, let me close that page there. All right. All right, so colors are nice. Layout's nice. I think it works. Typography is well chosen. Looks like she did the typography on the logo, that central part, so that's cool. Overall, good job on this one. Moving on to Cat Moon editing service. Let me be your pen. So writing services, editing services. Good, a few things here. This was one of the things that I remember saying on this one. You know, if we were to, and sometimes it's just easier if let's see if we can not have Illustrator yell at us when we do this. The only way it won't is if you've outlined the fonts. But they haven't. It's a good practice to do it on projects like this because, you know, it just simplifies things. Make sure that you get printed exactly what you made. And even if, you know, nowadays with Typekit, Adobe Typekit, which goes and finds the font for you, if I have to go back and, you know, find this particular font, you know, whatever that font is, it might be a different version. It might have different settings in the kerning and tracking. So a lot of times it's just better to outline the font if that's what you know is permanent and that's what you like and that's your design. You want to set it in stone. If you send this without, you know, the printer might open this. And these days, probably the most common solution is that Typekit that comes up and asks you, you know, if you want to substitute this font. Well, that's fine, but consider that there's oftentimes many versions of that same font. It might look a little bit different. The spacing, tracking, and kerning especially might be different. So if you want to lock it in, you have to make outlines of your design still. Even though things have improved and become a lot different, you still have to do that. If you want this, if you spent the time kerning all your letters and you've got the layout just perfect and you know you want this, lock it in by creating outlines, because otherwise printer has to look this up. And hopefully it's the right font. Hopefully it's the right version of the font. That's what I should be more specific with, because sometimes these font designers, they'll do different things at different versions, and suddenly, you've got spacing that looks odd. Hopefully the printer catches it, but really the best way to ensure that you have exactly here, it looks like she did with this editing services down here. She did lock that in and create outlines of that or something. But, yeah, I guess I could find a font to replace it that looks kind of similar, but I don't think I'm going to bother to do that. Just figure that font is not real, not what she had chosen. I think this little text, we can just go back and forth down here. It's all just kind of hovering, floating on its own. Always look at things, ask if they have a reason to be tied to anything. And I think maybe what she was looking for was some emphasis, but still keeping this small. That's what I'm guessing that she was after. But it's almost like it's too small, or there's something that could be arranged with it. Maybe it could line up with something. Maybe it could line up with this. There's also the idea that the middle, you should put something in the middle of your piece. It's weird, got yellow here. So you should put something. Don't leave the middle blank. That's a general composition rule. Is that pink outline's kind of driving me crazy here, but maybe we'll just expand it just to see if it will let me do that. There we go. Now I can at least see this. Again, it's not the font. So let me be your pen. So that's now in the middle. If she really wanted it down here and smaller, let's say, look for something to line it up with. In this case, maybe it's, we're looking at that alignment, contrast, repetition, alignment. So the third item in that list. So those aligned. And that gives us a little bit more balance than before. But I like the texture she's got going on in here. I like the idea of the cat moon editing services, and it's got the moon, the big circle in the center. It's got kind of the right look and feel for this, but just a few things based on arrangements and where you might put things. Like if you really wanted it down there, it could happen, but look for ways. Things like this moon and editing services, all those line up so it feels right. But if it's over here, like it was here, this could line up here and maybe be a little bit bigger, and then this could work. But there's that general rule, and again, rules are meant to be broken, especially in graphic design. But a lot of times you don't want your center of your composition to be blank. There's almost like the cat is so close that there's almost kind of an implied kind of something happening going on in here, but it's not. There's not quite anything there, and it just feels that, well, we want to put something there in the middle. That said, this could work too. We got that alignment. But I would also consider something like this. Obviously, she has chosen better fonts, but might have to play around with that a little bit. But you know, maybe it's something like this. I kind of like how you had it, just so long as it's got something to align with. It'll probably make a little bit more sense. I don't know if we move the cat more toward the middle. That can break the boundary there. That's okay. It can align with that. It doesn't have to. You're kind of doing a right alignment, though, if it lines up with this. And then if there's a right alignment there, consider, you know, trying a right alignment here. So anyways, we've got more. He's kind of toward the center now. That could be a little bigger. So now our center's not blank. So I don't know, something to play around with a little bit more, but here it just seems to be missing something in the middle, and I think that even moving this over just a tad to the left will kind of balance it out a little bit, making this bigger. You could do that, those minimal two things, and it would improve it quite a bit. Or you could just keep playing around with the elements in their position. But I remember saying on this, that was one component that was missing. It's just kind of an empty center point to this. You've got the strong moon in the middle, but like dead center, we've got the cat. It's almost like there's something missing here. It feels like it. So I don't know, just an idea where you can play around with those elements and make it work, or you could even add an extra element, or, you know, do something to make that work a little better. But I think this works well overall. I like the idea. It's Cat Moon editing services, really simple, straightforward, and nice job on this. All right, I'm going to close this one out. Save. All right, Nina Miller. Might get font errors again. Oh, good, we didn't. So good job on that, Nina. She did outline her font. So if printer gets that, you're gonna know that that's gonna print exactly what you wanted. So good work on this. So here, I mean, I think we're kind of pushing our text a little bit close to the edge to make room for this. So you could do a few things. You know, maybe that's 2 elements right now. So if this is an older version, I'm probably on an older version than what she used to create it. It's gonna have some problems. Get rid of that. Pretend it's there, but it's just causing problems now. So, all right. So this one, let's say you want to do this layout. I think if it's not so big and touching the letters, it probably, you know, it doesn't. It feels now like these two Pablo. I don't know what that says. It looks like Chiles. It just looks kind of pushed toward the edge. So think about some other arrangements you might do with this. I might take this into the center. It's like it's wanting to be a center design, but it's not. There's plenty of things you could do, by the way. Maybe you could even, make this larger. That was another thing I mentioned. And kind of have these in the middle. This would have to be a different color. Get more of a, doesn't want to change. I want to change color. Oh, that's weird. I don't know why that doesn't change. Try to select it with the white arrow. Well, that's weird. It doesn't want to change color, but let's say you want this. Again, I like the center weighted design. I think that's kind of neat. Maybe we'll change the color of this and see if that changes color. Make it a red. Huh, never seen that issue before. Will not change color. It's probably because she's got the newer, I have 2015. She's probably using 2015.5. So that's probably why I'm not able to change the color on this. But my point being, maybe something like that could work a little better. But I think when you're pushing your text all the way out on the side, like we did here, it just feels like the text isn't very important, and the name is really important. So if that was more central, or you could even have it higher. But if you have it separated and pushed out to the very side, it just gives this feeling it's not very important, not very critical to this. And I don't think you want to show that since it's the name. You probably want to make it integral to your piece. And sometimes, let's check out this. Maybe we could talk about integrating the whole piece a little bit more. More of it. Oh, that's working. Sort of. I don't know what happened to this C. Kind of. Oh, that's the O. All right, well, that didn't do a very good job of warping it, but yeah, get the idea here. So centered compositions are neat, but just consider what your focal point is here. I think the name's probably the most important, and secondary is the symbol, this little icon here, whatever that's supposed to be. So, make sure the name's not being pushed off to the margins of the piece. And what that could be kind of center stage. And for some reason, Warp's not looking right at all. It's not looking how it normally does. But that again, when I'm using that Warp tool with, and there are different versions, like I say, she probably created this in 2000 in Adobe CC 2015.5, and I'm using just the regular. A lot of those tools are not going to work as well as they could. I've never really seen color not working. That was an issue before. All right, so that's little bit more effective as a center design. Just pretend that this warp tool actually worked a little bit better than it did. It didn't distort the letters so much. This background, maybe we can go a little bit more soft on it. It's still there. I kind of like what she did with that background, but opacity is not working. All right, well. Maybe something like that. Let's try opacity now. Let's see if that works. There we go. Down to about 30% maybe. So now we're not getting so much conflict between the foreground and the background. Just took these down to 28%, maybe even less, like 20%. So if they're just really subtle, that's can be kind of cool. But now you're getting a little bit more. Hopefully that shows, yeah, I'd like the warp letters to look a little bit better than they do. But you can get that, you get the right effect if you're, doing this originally and you're using the same version of the software. You're not going to run into these weird distortion effects. Like you can, but just make sure you go back and do it over again if you do. Right now, I didn't do anything new, and it still kind of did this distortion on that Pueblo. Didn't seem to distort Chili's very much. But anyway, different versions of software have different effects. So centered designs are awesome. I think they're fun to do. You could also do something like this. Another way to go, but hopefully that makes sense in terms of, and now it kind of aligns with this background, which I really like that. But, overlapping, I can't really show it. Maybe I can show it if I go, transparency was working. There we go. That'll work. I'll at least show another version of what I was after. Won't let me bring that to the front. Anyway, so that thing's got to be centered, and maybe it's not so visually dominant. A little more than that. Something like that, except better job of centering. Anyway, so that needs some help still, but hopefully you get the point. We've just got that center placed. It's kind of a logo, but this is an ad, but this works for an ad. All it has to do is suggest something. It has to have some sort of text in it. But the good thing is you could have got pretty creative with these ads this week. A lot of you did get really creative. We'll see some here coming up where you did. But yeah, I think she's got some good elements. I like what she's got as far as elements are concerned, but good typography choice. And I think the typography goes with the character pretty well. Just make sure you consider that hierarchy. What's most important? What's it feel like? Sometimes, again, you get that what they call fresh eyes effect, and you walk away and come back and look at it later, or you show someone else, or you can take a mirror and look at it in a mirror, turn your chair around and look at the monitor in a mirror. And all those things will kind of give you that fresh eyes effect where you're suddenly looking at it for the first time. And you can see things like this, and it's like, wait a minute, Pueblo Guiales, I don't know what that says again. Chiles is what I said before, but I can't tell what it says. Suddenly it's like you realize, that's all of a sudden being pushed to the very margins of the page. And I don't want that. I want this to kind of take center stage. This is kind of my point. Like, this is like the name of the restaurant or something. whatever it is. Whatever it is, it's being advertised. And, we'd probably want to know what that was if we were in, like I always use this example of a hotel, and that's the name of the restaurant. Maybe you could add something down here that says fine Mexican cuisine or something, to let us know what exactly it is, because I am unaware of what this is, what it's referring to. Not the worst thing ever, but for an advertisement, you always want to be really clear, make sure that people look at this and understand what it is, what's going on. So if it's a name that nobody recognizes, clarify with a little tagline that says what it is. Restaurant, even restaurant, or Spanish cuisine, or something to give us that indication. But that fresh eyes effect, I think, can be really useful. And you come back and you look at things like that, and you're like, well, my main part is not being read as my main part. I want people to really know the name of this restaurant. I don't care so much about the character. The character's nice, but it's kind of secondary to what the name is. I'm pushing that all the way to the margins right now. So anyways, hopefully that gives you something to work with. Nice try on this as far as, getting something that kind of works and works for this project and is put together. But hopefully that helps a little bit, just gives you some ideas, I think, in terms of what we're after. So yeah, you could even just say restaurant down at the base, and that's not a very good font, but I can leave Gothic. Why not? It's not exactly ideal either, but now we're clear what that is. See, now I can get color. I just can't add color into her objects because they're created in the newer version. Anyway, that's that. That's a little big now, but it's a little small. I always like to add a little bit of space between the letters. Not that much. It's a preference thing. Now we know what this is a little bit more. So anyway, moving on. Let's go to Kay Collins, and then we'll take a break. All right. Background's interesting. Little bit. One of the things that I was saying on this is that the parts feel, they're just kind of randomly dropped on the page, and they're all lacking kind of a cohesiveness and integration. You can round. Let's say if Jameson whiskey was rounded, aged 36 years, was also rounded in the baseline. Now we're kind of getting some motion that keeps our eyes on the page. Here it's just, we run across kind of like, we read this and it just doesn't, it's not that it doesn't work, but it just could be better. So as a designer, I think it's helpful to always look at, what can you do better? How can I improve? How can I make this work just a little bit more? It's like, I like how it is, and I've come a long ways, and it works how it is, but how could it work better? I don't think it ever hurts to ask that. So in this case, it might be the first thing that came to mind was rounding the baseline on the Jameson whiskey. in this 36 years, because this square format, it just seems to be begging for that kind of a treatment. And it'll keep us kind of in this piece and looking at it longer if we have this rounded kind of effect going on. This could be higher in the page, like this is kind of a key symbol. This kind of looks like a crown. Not really sure where she got the symbol, but I think the symbol works. I think if you just had it up higher, and if this was rounded, it would allow for that. But you got to think, when you drop an element that's a key element below the center, so if you look at it here, this is the center of this layout. When you drop it below that center, you're kind of assigning it less importance, and it kind of like is, kind of trudging along here at the bottom, placement-wise, and it's not ideal for some key element like this. Would be kind of assuming it's your logo or it's something that was used in the brand. People know the icon. You don't want to look at it. If that's the central part of the piece, you want that probably a little bit higher than center, not down kind of toward the bottom. And that placement's important. That placement's considered symbolic much of the time. And, you'll want to have that key elements like that higher. So this could be moved up, about an inch or so. So it's maybe just a little bit above center. These guys here, maybe consider some overlapping, maybe not. Maybe a little smaller. You could play around with those and try to do some different things with those. But overall, I like what you've kind of started with. Font's good. The style's good. The symbol, is good. Logo. But maybe just try to integrate this a little bit. Consider overlapping. Like even if you brought these corner pieces in, maybe you made them just larger, and then it was kind of, the central kind of round motif. Might work a lot better. I can't really say for sure. I'll have all like ideas all the time, and I won't know unless I actually try them out and see how they work and see how they kind of fit together. And this is a flattened JPEG file, so I can't play around with this one. I can't try some different things out. So hopefully that gives you some idea, though, on some other things you could do to this to kind of improve it. Definitely meets the criteria of the assignment, and other than a little bit more work and some of those things I mentioned, it's a good start on this. All right, so that's going to be it for now. We'll go ahead and why don't we do a 10-minute break? Who knows? Some people might show up after the break, but we'll continue with the reviews when we get back.